Welcome to another episode of Estudar Direito pelo Mundo, Studying Law Around the World, the podcast where I interview legal professionals, professors, lawyers, and people in other countries about their legal studies elsewhere. So today I'll have the opportunity to interview Dr. Renato, Saeger, and Costa. And to start this up, I'll go ahead and read a little bit about his bio. So Renato specializes in constitutional, comparative, and administrative law. He graduated with an LLB from the Faculty of Law at the Catholic University of Pernambuco in Brazil, and he holds an LLM from the University of Queensland in Australia, where he held an Endeavours Award postgraduate scholarship. He is currently a PhD candidate and an RTP scholar at TC Bairn School of Law from the University of Queensland, where he also teaches public and constitutional law. So, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Renato. I really appreciate you taking the time to share a little bit about your experience in Australia with us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you, Claudio.
Thank you. Well, for us to start our conversation, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you decided to go to Australia, and especially when you're thinking about law in Australia.
Yeah, it's well, very different from my background, of course, from Brazil. But the thing was that I came to Australia first, straight after high school. I came here for an exchange program, and I was living in Sydney, and I absolutely loved the country, and I wanted to come back one day, and I thought I might be able to come back maybe just to visit or something like that as tourism a few years later. But then I went back to Brazil, did my university. When I finished the degree, I practiced law for 3 years. And while I was practicing, I always had the desire to, study abroad. I wanted to do a master's or even a PhD abroad. And then I started looking for scholarships all around the world, and applied for some in Europe, applied for some elsewhere, and then this opportunity came for a scholarship in Australia, and I applied for it. I needed to apply to all the universities I could to get approved, receive an offer from the university, and then apply for this scholarship, because the scholarship was from the Australian government. And so, I applied for 7 universities, had to pick one. I chose the University of Queensland in Brisbane, and then applied for this particular scholarship called Endeavour, and came. And since I've been here since, so I came in 2018, and it's been great. Yeah,
that's fantastic. What a story. That's really awesome. I'm happy to hear that, and I feel like, especially in this audience, there's a lot of people who are interested in studying abroad, and especially trying to figure out how is that even possible with a law degree. So it's awesome just to get to know more and more stories of people who actually do that. Well, so you mentioned a little bit about getting a scholarship from the Australian government. So could you share with us some information about the research training program, or RTP? How does that work if people are thinking about doing that as well?
yeah, of course. My first scholarship for the masters was Endeavour, and unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore. It ceased in 2020. But I'm currently doing my PhD on the RTP, which is the Research Training Program. And the RTP basically provides block grants on a calendar year basis to higher education providers. So the idea is to help the universities support both domestic and overseas students while they are undertaking their research doctorate or their master degrees by research. And yeah, they are known. We are all known as higher degrees by research, HDRs. So it is an Australian government grant that works through the universities. So when you apply for an LLM or a PhD, you choose to apply for this scholarship as well during the application. So while I'm filling up the forms and sending my documentation, I have an option to try to compete for this scholarship, for one of these scholarships. Depending on the course, there are plenty of opportunities, RTP scholarships. So today, if you want to do something in biology and related to vaccines research, you probably have a number of opportunities. In law particularly, it's not a lot, so it will be allocated to different universities. But it's a really good scholarship because it helps you not only cover the tuition costs of the course, which are quite high for universities, but it also gives you a monthly stipend. And so it helps you to just live and pay your bills. So it's really good.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. That really makes sense, and I love that. It's a very nice opportunity, and I guess not as many countries offer scholarship that also gives you a stipend and helps out with all of that. So that's really incredible. Um, and thinking about that, you mentioned that you have to apply for the university, right? So when it's about the selection process, what is a selection process like for a university in Australia? Are there many differences, or how does that work? Like for a master's, for a PhD, could you share a little bit with us?
Yeah, I think the process itself is quite simple and straightforward. I I think it's somewhat close to what would happen in Brazil, with the difference being that um, I don't want to sound I don't let me rephrase this, okay? Maybe you can edit this, but it's just in Brazil the field of law is highly politicized, and sometimes it's really hard to get into an LLM or even a PhD without getting to know the supervisor before or having been working with the supervisor previously, etc. Here, it's not like that. It's more merits based in terms of the curriculum. So, for example, when you apply for a master's, I did my master's by coursework, wasn't by research. So I didn't have to do a research project. It was basically just my curriculum, a form just with my motivation to be there, why I wanted to participate in that particular university, why I wanted to study law, and what good outcomes my studying there would bring to the university or to the world. Generally, that was the idea. But when you're doing a PhD, of course, you have to do all of that and a research project, and the same with masters by research. So um, you be selected accordingly to your curriculum and according to the project that you have. The university will be setting, let's say, 3 or 4 scholarships per intake per semester, and they will be giving that to those who they ranked first according to their projects. So the biggest difference, maybe, other than that I highlighted, is that in Brazil, you you would need a personal relationship with the supervisor, and somehow your project can be quite phenomenal and you're not going to get through. Whereas here, it's the best the project, the biggest the chance you get to get into the university and study. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's really interesting to know, especially for I guess the international folks who didn't have the opportunity to also hear a little bit about the Brazilian system. So that was good that you brought that up. Yeah, that's incredible. So as I was reading your bio, I also mentioned that you do teach constitutional law, right? Could you tell us a little bit about that experience? Maybe not only about teaching it, but just I guess like constitutional law learning and teaching, and even I don't know, some comparisons you have noticed along the years compared maybe to the Brazilian experience of studying constitutional law and so forth.
Yeah, it's a long journey coming from civil law background to common law. You have to adapt a lot, but it is really good. For me particularly, it was I knew what was coming because I prepared beforehand. So I knew that what the common law system involved, what I needed to focus on in terms of knowing the cases were most important than anything else. I needed to know what were the main cases in Australia. I knew that, well, reading the Constitution was going to be good, but I needed to understand how the High Court here in Australia worked. So that was the first step. Coming from a civil law background, we are obviously focusing on legislation and statutes, the enacted laws and acts of parliament. Here, you have that focus as well, but primarily on the decisions of the highest court in Australia, the High Court. So there are no big difference, particularly in terms of constitutional law, but in terms of how you study, how you approach the subjects. So in Brazil, I studied law to pass the individual subjects. Read the book that the teacher has told me to read. I would practice some questions in the style of the bar exam, the OAB in Brazil. And that's the way we kind of study. Here, it's more self-directed studies. So we have lectures, usually for an hour, and then tutorials or seminars that run from 1 to 3 hours. And that's when the lecture sort of levels everyone and puts everyone the same level with some basic information about the content. And then from there, we go into the seminars or tutorials, and that's where we go deep. And the students come prepared, already having seen the lecture and already having studied by themselves. So they come prepared with questions, etc. So I think it demands a bit more of preparation to be a teacher here, because you have to be aware of the content, well aware of the content, so that you can answer the questions that the students are asking. So I didn't teach law back in Brazil. I only practiced law, but I always wanted to. And so my first experience was already here. And it's great, it's amazing, but I'll be honest, the first time I was teaching, I would be studying maybe 2 weeks in advance that content, and studying so much so I could get into the classroom. And looking back now, so I've been teaching for 4 years now, and looking back, maybe it wasn't great. The first weeks of teaching weren't amazing, but yeah, you grow into it as well. So you learn more, and you start to anticipate the questions that students have. You start to know exactly what's the content that students have difficulty with, and you learn from there. And then I guess being part of the Commonwealth, which was something that I think we should mention, because Australia is part of the Commonwealth. It does shape how we study law here as well. Not only because it is a Commonwealth country, but especially this idea of the Commonwealth, because we are sharing a monarch, and it shapes the system itself, and because of that, it also shapes our legal system. So even questions of succession of the monarchy now, constitutional questions that we're dealing with, because we inherit this British common law. And from there, we shape our constitutional law and we shape our system. So it's everything's very new for someone who's coming from a civil law background from Brazil, but it's not impossible. So I think that's a message that we should be saying here. People shouldn't be discouraged by changing from one system to the other because they think it would be too overwhelmingly different. It is different, but since you have a legal mentality, once you have that, you can adapt and apply the principles. You understand things more clearly. So yeah, if anyone is maybe listening and it's thinking that it would be too hard, don't put too much pressure on yourself. You can do it.
Fantastic. That's awesome. And it's amazing because being a legal professional also in Brazil, we always talk about it like a big amount of options that you would have for employment and for your future, right? And I guess being a lawyer is not the only option, right? Even in other jurisdictions. So I have had episodes before where I talked about how to become a lawyer in Australia, both for Australian citizens that grew up there, as well as being a foreign student. But also there's this opportunity of being a researcher, being a professor as well, right, in the legal field. So that's another interesting thing. So I got that you said that you've been teaching for about 4 years now. Does that mean that you started teaching since your master's program, or did it only start after you became a PhD? How does that normally works?
Yeah, we I started teaching in my master's. So in the last semester of my master's course, I was invited to teach, which doesn't quite happen. So it was quite extraordinary to have been invited. One of the professors that, since I already had the experience in public law back in Brazil, the course coordinator in the particular course of public law, he invited me. He wanted someone to teach, and he wanted to give some fresh air to the course. And he thought, why not just an international student who has the experience but doesn't quite know the details about public law, but could figure it out? Why not invite him? So he gave it a go, as we say here. And well, since then I've been teaching. And then I started teaching constitutional law as well, which is a more advanced course here. And it's not that common, as I said. So you wouldn't expect someone who's doing a master's to start teaching, but in a PhD, that's expected. So at PhD level, you're expected to be publishing in journals, even if they are not the best journals, but at least starting to get some peer-reviewed articles in specific journals. And also teaching, getting some teaching experience as a tutor for 1 hour in these classes, or as a seminar leader in 2 or 3 hours, and even giving some guest lecturing. So I've been fortunate enough to be doing that. So I've been teaching constitutional law as a tutor. I teach public law as a seminar leader and as a guest lecturer, and I've been giving some guest lecturing in the LLM as well, so in the postgraduate. So yeah, it's expected for a PhD student to do that. Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. That's so cool. Well, and for all that I know, your teaching is not only in the classroom, but you also have a YouTube channel where you're teaching Aussie law, right? So could
Yeah.
you tell us a little bit about how the idea of making a YouTube channel got started?
Of course, yeah. Aussie law is the creation of someone who specifically came from Brazil. So Brazil is the country that consumes most content on YouTube. So we are used to Googling and going straight to YouTube and trying to find a video and watch videos there. So I was used to that. And when I came to Australia, I wanted to learn about the Australian legal system. I went to YouTube, but I couldn't find really anything there. There were some lectures from conferences, but the discussion is too elevated for someone who's only wanting to get introduced to the system. So the idea was from someone who was coming to Australia, wanted to learn the Australian system, but couldn't find the resources to do that. So I started the channel with the fundamental principles of the Australian legal system. What is it about? What are some important cases? And while I was teaching public law, which is also an introductory course, I kind of put them together. So while I was teaching public law, the content that I was teaching, I started recording some videos. And the idea of Aussie Law, of the YouTube channel, is to have some short videos. So it's not to go too long. I get one topic, I talk about it for 6 to 12 minutes maybe, and then that's it. If there's still more to be said about it, I'll record another video so that people actually can choose what to look at and not spend too much time on YouTube consuming that video. So that's where the idea came from. And then it developed a bit more because my students from constitutional law and even the course coordinator in constitutional law, they started asking, hey, can we use this as an additional resource for teaching so that we can tell students to go and watch them at their own time? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So I started recording some more videos. And yeah, the idea is it has this double purpose. I want to contribute to people's knowledge about Australian law, history, and its legal system. But it also has this portfolio for me in the end, because I'm a lecturer, I'm a casual, and I want to become, of course, I want to integrate the career. And so it shows that I have this certain authority and knowledge of the content as well. So it works for me, and it works for everyone who's watching as well. So yeah, anyone interested in Australian law is more than welcome to join the channel and watch some of the videos there.
Fantastic. Well, it's homework, guys. I'll put it in description, the link of Aussie Law, and please go and subscribe to it. Well, that was really nice. I'm really happy to getting to understand a little bit about your experience. And as I said, Australia, just yeah, there's quite a few people that I've connected so far that have or like interests in Australia, or then have, I guess, like 3 or 4 friends who have done something in Australia, either like just an English language exchange or actually going there and studying law to become a lawyer, which is a long path. And there's a podcast episode about that. But the research part of it is really interesting. And I guess other opportunities would probably be possible too for Brazilians who are working in their graduate studies, probably doing some kind of research abroad or something like that. Would you happen to know if RTP is that only for like full degrees, or could you use that also for some shorter opportunity?
Well, I think the RTP particularly is for full-time studies, but I'm not sure. But you're absolutely right in terms of some other areas that could be done. So visiting scholars are welcome. People who can come to do research just because of grants, so fellowships, research fellows are also welcomed. If your focus is not on teaching, but only on doing some research. So all of that is possible and exists, and there are many grants and many scholarships in that area, not only from the universities, but from associations. So, for example, Latin American Studies, the Students Association, they have a bunch of scholarships that they can give. And yeah, if you have a particular topic that a particular student, a particular professor in the law school or anywhere else is researching, you can apply for that as a research fellow. Yeah, the opportunities are many, and it's as you said in the beginning, it's not only to do a law degree, it's not only to become a lawyer. You can do many things, and coming to Australia to do something else, it's welcomed, definitely.
Well, I think those are the main questions that I had right now. But thank you so much for taking the time to share with us a little bit about your experience, and also, yeah, just it's really neat to get you understand some of your story. To be honest, it's amazing that you went there on an exchange, and then after pursuing the possible scholarships, end up getting to Australia again. So that's amazing. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Claudio. It was a pleasure.